Hi, everyone. I'm Matthew. I'm the pastor of Westside Fellowship Church, and this is session 3 of our mental health module. Unfortunately, I forgot to hit record at the very beginning, and so because of that, I started the recording a little bit into the session. Don't worry, you didn't miss much. When we pick up here, we are at the very first slide that Wayne is showing us about self-care. That's what this session is all about. It's our third and final session in this module, as we've looked at anxiety, depression, and now self-care. And so I'm going to turn it over to Wayne, who is a master's student working on his master's in counseling, as he talks to us about self-care. Take a look.
And be self-reflective, which then impacts intellectual self-care. So again, not to separate them out too much, but just to give a little bit of an indication and an explanation of what self-care is all about. Before we go to signs of self-care, I also just want to mention that self-care is definitely a long-term process. So, me and Pastor Matt had a bit of a discussion about that, about what does coping techniques or things that you can do in the moment that helps you face a difficult situation or getting through that. Self-care is not that. Self-care really is changing your lifestyle in a way that makes a difference for the better. So in some ways it's lifestyle changes, but as we go through, hopefully that will come to the fore. So signs of lack of self-care. If you are feeling unappreciated or undervalued, you put others' needs ahead of your own. Again, it sounds like a good thing. It sounds like, oh, I'm being a really good person if I put others' needs before my own. But if you keep doing that, you're not taking care of your own needs, there'll be a point in time when you will burn out, you'll become negative about it, you'll resent it. It won't be a blessing to you. It will be almost like a curse, if I can put that word. So that way, so taking care of yourself does come first, even as far as that is concerned. Your schedule doesn't reflect your priorities. If we are parents, so many of us know that, we have our kids and often we are running around after our kids, but there are other things that need to be done. And then it's all over the show. Sometimes you can just be going from one activity to the next thing because it's just things that need to get done. So priorities doesn't get reflected in that. Your to-do list keeps getting longer. So again, it's all those good intentions. Oh, I want to do this, I got to do that. But the list gets longer and things don't get done. That's a sign, of self-care, lack of self-care. You can't relax or slow things down. Again, it's almost being on that treadmill and you're just running on that treadmill and you can't get off it. You don't have a support network. You think self-care is selfish. We talked about that a little. You lack compassion for yourself. And this is a very important one. As we go through this as well, I might try, if I remember to keep coming back to that. As people, we need to have compassion for ourselves. Being a perfectionist or having perfectionist tendencies, it's good to get things done and do it properly, but at the end of the day, we can't drive ourselves like slave masters or be so hard on ourselves that we just lose the joy in life. So we need to have compassion on ourselves. And if things don't go right, nothing goes right for everybody all the time. So if things don't go right, be compassionate on yourself. You feel as if you have to do everything. Again, it shows a lack of self-care because you're trying to keep control, you're trying to keep ahead of everything, and you can't let things go because you're just too afraid to let go. So spirituality isn't a priority. Again, we might describe ourselves as people of faith, or you might describe yourself as a spiritual person, but it's not a priority. Again, that is a sign, of a lack of self-care. So just some of the signs that, that if you are experiencing these things that you can go, that shows that, you probably need to look at self-care and take better care of yourself.
Now, Wayne, how is spirituality not a priority, a sign of a lack of self-care? I'm just asking because, I'm a pastor. I do think spirituality is important, but I also know that we live in a society when there are a lot of people who don't believe that there's a God. They think that spirituality isn't important, and they might even say that their lives are fine, that they're doing okay.
So yeah, it's a good point. So from a Christian perspective, it would differ from somebody who isn't um, religious. But even for a person that doesn't believe, there is still a spiritual side to human nature. So that might be going for walks in nature, just enjoying music, just taking part, sort of that side of us as human beings that is outside of ourselves, or that transcends who we are just in our flesh, if I can put it that way. So, what does that look like? So even if you don't believe, people still sort of connect with nature. They will still connect with certain things. And for people in such cases, it's sort of a question of, okay, how do you express those feelings or needs that you have for yourself? I'd say from a spiritual Christian spirituality perspective, it's probably a little bit like going to, as you say, as a pastor, going to a sermon. You hear the sermon on the Sunday, you have all those intentions to start, the coming week, but you never get there. So in your mind, oh, I need these things. This is what is important. And from, you feel like, yes, this is what I need to do, but you never get to them. That is, again, that's where the lack of self-care comes in, because you don't have the time, you don't have the resources, you don't have the energy. And even though in your head you can sort of frame it as, oh gosh, I really need to do this, it's just not happening.
Right.
And I think that's, again, where it comes into that self-care is a lifestyle. It's not just a thing that you do. So being, spirituality being a priority becomes a lifestyle thing of what that means to you in a way that is meaningful. And I'm glad that you asked that as well, because self-care, again, is also something that is really unique to every single person. So we talk about these things sort of in broad concepts, but what self-care would look like, every individual will look different. So also to keep that in mind. Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the window of tolerance. So this is not quite self-care at the moment, but it's so important about how self-care builds into this. So the window of tolerance, as you see there, there's two sort of dotted lines on the one on the top and the one on the bottom there. And in between that is a person's window of tolerance. That is when you are able to think and feel at the same time. So something happens, you can look at it, you process it, you think about it, your emotions are intact, and you can deal with it, and you're comfortable with it, and everything is fine. Now, the window of tolerance, if there's a lack of self-care, that window can be really narrow. So the things that you can tolerate, the things, where you sort of deal with things, is only that is narrow. And then if something happens that pushes you out of that, it can push you into an area where anxiety comes in, which is in the top there, sort of hyperarousal. You get really, you get angry very quickly. Because your window is narrow, you're almost always hyper vigilant. You're sort of waiting for the worst thing to happen. Something's going to go wrong. As it says, there are also feelings of a lack of emotional safety. So you won't share how you feel, because if you share, it might become overwhelming, and then it pops you through the top. Hyper arousal is when, your window of tolerance again is narrow. You drop out of the bottom. So somebody says something, you don't answer them, but it just hits you like a sort of like a cannonball almost, and you just feel completely deflated. You feel flat or numb, as it says there. You shut down, you don't talk. It's because your window of tolerance, something has happened and it's pushed you through that window of tolerance, either downward or upward. And self-care is about helping a person to widen that window of tolerance, so that when these things happen, you don't go through the top or go through the bottom. I also, if it's okay, just to talk about this a little bit, because people, when they window of tolerance is sort of challenged or pushed, react one way or the other. So some people will react in a way that sort of causes hyperarousal, and other people will go to the route of hypoarousal. Now, in relationships, this is really important, because you will find, and we'll use a husband and a wife, for example, as an example, that maybe something happens and the wife becomes really agitated and she wants to talk about it because it's happened. She's outside of a window of tolerance. She's feeling anxious. She wants to deal with it. Whereas the same thing is happening to the husband, and he also goes through his window. It also pushes him out, but he goes to the hyperarousal where he shuts down. And he doesn't want to talk about it. He goes into his garage and he does something with, with his tools or whatever. He goes outside, works on his car or whatever. He's avoiding it. And then what happens is those behaviors actually cause problems between the two, because now the wife feels like, oh, he's ignoring me. He doesn't want to talk about it. Where he feels like, gosh, this thing's happened. I'm not feeling comfortable. She's hounding me. She wants just to hear what's going on. And so that's how this plays out. And again, I'm sort of talk about this because self-care really helps us to widen that window of tolerance. If both of them were engaged in self-care, they wouldn't pop through those dotted lines. They would be able to have a conversation, and it will leave them in a better place, not just for their own self-care, their own well-being, but also on a relational level. So I don't know if that made sense, Pastor Matt, but I just thought I'd bring that in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's really good. I guess just to clarify, I guess everybody has the ability to go either too high or too low. Do people have a tendency to go one way or the other though? Or is it depending on the situation and circumstance? We might go, hyper arousal in one situation, but hypo arousal in another, or just we have a tendency of, if we're the hyper arousal type, we're always going to be, that way. We're always going to be, angry or frustrated and want to hash it out, or we're always hypo arousal where we're always trying to withdraw.
It's sort of it can become it's sort of a tendency that shows where you would normally head to. Mm-hmm. But there can be expectations, where you would head in a different direction. But as you said, some people are more prone to hyperarousal and other to hypoarousal. So, there might be sort of a pattern of behavior there that, so a person that struggles with anxiety, for example, is going to be more the hyperarousal, whereas a person who's struggling with depression will be more the hypo. So because, again, there's other factors that come into play, but they, it can also differ from situation, but yeah, in general, there'll be sort of a tendency to one or the other.
Yeah, that's good.
Awesome. Again, just encourage, as people listen to this, just to sort of keep this in the back of their mind as well, that again, self-care, to show that self-care is not about yourself. It's about you, yes, but it's also about the people around you. And hopefully this really illustrates that really well, that if your self-care is good and you're doing well physically, mentally, spiritually, all those ones we looked at, it'll help widen that window of tolerance. And that's good for you, but it's also good for the people around you. Those people that are special to you, family, friends, it's good for all of you. Okay. So we're going to look a little bit doing, sort of from a practical perspective. So sort of a self-care plan, evaluating your coping skills. So there's lots of, I've listed quite a few here, but hopefully as we go through this, people will go, oh yeah, that is me, or oh yeah, I can do that. Or again, it's really so unique to every single person, but there's some ideas here. But also by sort of putting it out there as a self-care plan, I'm trying to say, to also communicate that this doesn't happen by itself. You really need to be intentional about this. So if you've seen that window of tolerance and you think, man, yeah, I want to widen my window of tolerance. I want my self-care to be better. I want to be, my relationships with others to improve. You need a plan. It's not just going to happen by itself. So as we talk about this a little bit more, you'll see that, and hopefully this will motivate you to say, okay, how can I make a self-care plan for myself? So evaluate your coping skills. Every single person, again, is different. So sort of look down and do it as this, put a list down, say, okay, what is my positive coping skills and what are my negative ones? And I'll just sort of read through them. So positive, deep breathing. We talked about that, just slowing your breathing down. That is a positive skill, because again, it helps you to calm down. That window of tolerance widens. You're not just going to pop out to the top or the bottom. The breathing is a good one. Stretching, listening to music. Some people love listening to music. It just puts them, it just relaxes them. It's a good thing. Exercising, reading, going for walks, taking a bath, socializing with friends, sitting outside and relaxing, engaging in a hobby. And these are just a few. There's so much more. Maybe, doing carpentry, all kinds of things that, that you can, as you think about yourself, that you can make a list of what is positive. And even as we start this, hopefully you'll see that there's a focus here of being self-reflective of who you are, the things that you value, the things that are meaningful to you, and things that help you, that is positive to you. The negative side, again, that window of tolerance, if you go through the top or the bottom, what are some of the things that you notice about yourself? Do you yell at others? Are you acting aggressively, overeating, drinking excessive amounts of alcohol, smoking, pacing, biting your fingernails, taking drugs, skipping meals, withdrawing from family and friends, and dangerous driving? So those, again, are some of those negative parts of coping skills. And just to put that into perspective as well, so yelling is a coping skill. It's not a healthy coping skill, but it's a coping skill. You've gone through the top one, and now you're yelling at people because you're angry. You want to deal with things, you want to fix it, or whatever the case might be, but you're yelling and screaming, you're acting aggressively, for example. It's a coping skill, but it's a negative coping skill. It does not help you, and it doesn't help the people around you. So be honest with yourself, write those down, and then so that you have those two lists of, positive and negative coping skills.
So the first step to figuring out our own personal self-care plan is to simply write down the things that we do, good, bad, whatever, write all the ways that we tend to cope.
Exactly. And that way we get to know ourselves, and we can, be honest with ourselves about this and the way we go forward. Yeah. Awesome. Identify your self-care needs. So again, we sort of separating them out a little bit, but as I said earlier, they all work together. But you'll probably find that some things you don't, you do well, but in other things you don't do that well. So identify your self-care needs. So I've got them there: physical, so diet, sleep, and health. How are you doing physically? And again, me and Pastor Matt were talking about it a little bit earlier, and we were sort of talking about sleep. And I said, man, I could probably speak in half an hour to an hour just on sleep. But as you identify these things, then you can start looking into them deeper and seeing, okay, what can I do to help with those areas? Emotional, sort of list them down. So this is, again, I put it sort of as a the way I put it down with columns and things, so that write these things down and then put those in for yourself. I can't put those in for you. You've got to put those in for yourself. So again, as a previous exercise, go through these things and write down, what it is for you. So emotional, positive activities, acknowledge your own activities, healthy emotions. Again, if you are good at something, write it down. Don't sort of have the humility of saying, oh, I don't want to, I don't want to really think about what I can do well or what I'm good at. No, write those down, because those are strengths. So write them down.
So like emotional, are you talking like something as simple as, I know I need hugs, so I got to make sure I get a hug from somebody today, or something like that?
Exactly, because it's how you feel. So even as you say, I need a hug, you sort of smile, because that is what hugs do. For many of us, hugs are, it's a good emotional feeling. You can sort of feel the warmth, and the smile comes with it. So exactly how that would make you feel. So what makes you feel good? Yeah. Spiritual. Again, some examples is sort of read inspirational literature, self-reflection, time and nature, as we talk about. So this is also sort of, it's making a list of things that you would do that is meaningful to you. And if you're not doing them, maybe think about things that you can do that will fill that need. Professional, looking at work-life balance. Are you spending too much time at work, or what that looks like? Again, it's not, the realities of life might determine one way or the other, but being aware of it and thinking of it, and not just going on auto cruise, but actually thinking about these things. So is your work meaningful? So are you enjoying work? What does that look like? Good relationships with co-workers. Again, think about these things. It's about, being aware of them. Social, healthy relationships, time for family and friends. I put in date nights there. Husband and wife, again, Don't take things for granted or just go on sort of an auto cruise. Be purposeful and say, you know what, we still need these things. And with COVID, a lot of this is hard, but how can we do it maybe differently? Again, it's not going to happen by itself. You've got to be intentional with these things, as it is with self-care in general. Yeah. Asking for support from family and friends is another big one. As you think about that, do you ask for people's help or don't you? And it can be really hard. And it's one that I've always struggled with, is asking for help. I'd rather sort of do it myself, even when it comes to like reading the instructions. It's like I'll only read the instructions once I've at least spent half an hour trying to make it fit, and it doesn't work. So asking for help can be hard, but write it down and understand it. Asking for help is good. So, from that social perspective. So yeah, do it. Financial, again, is very important with self-care. If your finances aren't healthy, or not, working out, or there's overbearing debt, you are not going to have a good sort of mental health, if I can put it that way. You're going to be worried, you're going to be stressed, it's going to be heavy on your mind all the time. So think about how, finances is impacting you. Are there things that you can do to adapt to that? What can you do? Again, once sort itself out, you've got to be intentional with that as well, but it's going to impact your mental well-being. Psychological, take time for yourself. I think somebody, a comment was made last week about, the difficulty of living with people who struggle with depression. If you're taking care of somebody, if you're taking care of an elderly person, it's hard to take time for self, but it is so important. Again, it's not being selfish. If you, especially when you're sort of taking care of an elderly person, you need a lot of time for yourself, because you are giving so much of yourself. It's not selfish. If you're not taking care of yourself, you can't take care of that other person. You can't be there for that other person. Again, so take care of yourself. Disconnecting from electronic devices, especially that's one, again, with the COVID, always, sort of reading about it, being on top of it. It causes anxiety. It just sucks you in. It's almost like a magnet. You'll just find yourself on your phone. You're not even thinking about it. It almost just happens. And you go, oh gosh, here I am again. So, disconnecting from electronic devices. Journal, write things down. A great one to journal is take some time every day and just write down what went well. What is it that happened today that was good? What went well? Because our minds as humans are so drawn to what is negative, to what is going wrong, but what is going well? So we have to be purposeful to say, no, but there are things that are going well. It's not an all or nothing thing either. Yeah, sometimes things are bad, don't go well, but they also go well, and we sort of navigate between those things. But if we don't focus on what goes well, we almost sort of will find ourselves only on the negative side of things. So yeah, journaling. Pursue new interests, learn new skills. Again, very personal, whatever, is meaningful to you, write those things down. So identify your self-care needs and where it is lacking and what you can do to fulfill those. Yeah.
So what I'm getting from this, Wayne, is that you're not just going to give us, these are the steps that you need to do. It's more introspective. We need to take the time to actually focus on ourselves, learn more about ourselves if we, haven't done that before, of how do we cope. Recognizing that, yeah, there are times that we're out of that, that window of tolerance. And so we're reacting sometimes negatively, sometimes in a very healthy way. And then figuring out what are the things that we need to do to take care of all aspects in our lives. And that's going to be different for each and every one of us.
Exactly. No, exactly. And it's a process. So as you say, there's no 1, 2, 3, 4 step to it. It's your journey as a person, right, finding out who you are, what is important to you, and how you live up to those things. And it's interesting because they sort of in psychology, they talk about having sort of different levels of needs. Some of you might have seen sort of that triangle, and sort of the basic need is food and water. Then the next thing is sort of accommodation, or a house. Then the next one will be finances, and then it sort of goes up. And the top one is self-actualization, which is knowing yourself, knowing who you are, and living out that self of who you are. And we all strive towards that in one way or the other. But as if we can't meet the bottom ones, it's hard to do the top ones. So that's where self-care comes in, because it helps you to sort of take care of those foundational ones as you find who you are, who you're meant to be, what your shape is, if I can use that image maybe, and live out who you are. And who you are is not selfish. It's just who you are. And that helps you then to relate with those around you and be the best person that you can be. So, yeah. And again, as you said, it's not a 1, 2, 3 step. It's very much a journey. And maybe just add here as well, just as a word of encouragement, that it can be very hard. And part of that is for something to become a habit, it takes normally around 60 days. So you might find yourself writing these things down and say, oh, I'm going to do this in a week or 2 weeks. You go, oh, I can't do this anymore. And that is going to be natural, because until it becomes a habit, it's actually hard to do, because you've got to expend energy, you've got to think of it, you've got to remind yourself, and that will drain you as well. It can take resources, and it might feel, oh, is this really worth it? But after 60 days, normally it becomes a habit. You don't need to think about those things anymore. It's like breathing almost. It becomes a lifestyle, and then it becomes a lot easier. So just to mention that maybe as some encouragement to say, might be hard in the beginning, but sort of, yeah, persevere. Okay. So yeah, create a self-care plan. So just sort of boil it down a little bit maybe, so that it doesn't seem too big. So again, think daily about, daily self-care plan about your body, your mind, spirit, emotions, relationships, work. Again, you can maybe journal it or just write those things down and sort of be aware of what's happening in your life. Things that have happened. How's your body feeling? Are you feeling achy? Are you feeling stressed? And just, sort of write them down and those different ones. Because again, as you become aware of those things, it really helps you to address them. You're not just going to go on sort of an auto cruise, just trying to make it to the weekend. So sort of slow down, think about what is happening with your emotions, your relationships, work, sort of step back from yourself a little bit and just look and see, okay, what is happening? Why do I feel the way I do? What's going on? Because as you recognize that, then you can use all of those things that we talked about before to address those issues. So we're not just going to leave it there. If we find, okay, there's something we need to do, then we can address those issues. And then sort of top 3 positive coping strategies. Again, it's really personal. So if you find that, your body, maybe you find that there's tenseness during the day, what is a coping strategy that you can use to relax? So you can do the breathing, or you can do, that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 that we talked about earlier, previously. There's a coping strategy, but find 3 positive ones that work for you. Because the more you relate with what you're doing, the more it's meaningful to you, the greater the chances are that you will do them. So don't do something because you read it on Google that it's going to work, but really, I don't really want to do this. You probably won't do it. So again, it's being self-aware and find what really works for you. So yeah, just some self-care activities. I thought I'd just sort of pop them down there so that people could get an idea of what some of them might be. And hopefully, as you see, as you go through it, I won't go through all of them because it'll take a while, but laying in the grass is one, for example. I mean, this is not rocket science. It doesn't mean you've got to expend money or it's going to take you half a day to do it. Maybe it's just, if that's nice to you, lie in the grass, or maybe if it's dark, going outside and just watching the stars. That is a self-care activity, because you're actually taking the time to do something for yourself, which is meaningful, which is good. Having a game night with friends, there's a good one. Read a good book, buy yourself flowers. Again, it doesn't sound great, but if you love flowers, you love to smell them, buy yourself flowers. It's okay, do that. All kinds of things there to that people can do. And the list is not exhaustive. Again, as you think about these things, think about yourself, write them down and try them. And again, because as we said earlier about that window of tolerance, as you do these things, it helps you to sort of regulate your emotions. It helps widen that window of tolerance. It has a healthy impact on who you are, who you see yourself to be, because that's another really important part of self-care. We're not going to get into that too much here, but because again, it's a topic on itself, is the things that you say to yourself. You know, so there's so many of us that engage in negative self-talk. Say, oh, well, I can't do this. If I do this, people will criticize me. Or, you know, if I do this, it's not going to work out well. You know, I don't have the energy to do this, or I'm not strong enough to do this. We have that sort of negative self-talk in us. So that self-care is part of changing that emphasis of to saying, you know, that the glass isn't half empty, the glass is actually half full. I can do things. I can do a simple thing as like lying in the grass because I enjoy it. And that's great because I can do this. It gives, you know, it's meaningful to me, and that means a lot. So again, it really helps a person to not engage in that negative self-talk and break away from that. And if you find yourself a negative self-talk, try and address it and say, okay, if you find yourself looking at the situation in a negative way, think of an alternative way of maybe what's happening. You know, try and spin it around or reframe things. Again, it's that being aware is what self-care is about. So if you find yourself in that, try and see why is it. Maybe you're tired because you're so tired all the time. That's why you can't see the good side. So you've got to look at your sleep. What can I do to improve my sleep, etc., etc. Thanks, Pastor Matt. I think that. You know, there's a lot to think about there and a lot to digest. So hopefully, you know, that'll be helpful to people, and hopefully, yeah, be encouraging. I don't know if there's any questions.
Yeah, no, thanks, Wayne. That's great. Again, if you have questions, go ahead and send them my way in the chat box. As Wayne's getting out of the sharing the screen mode.
Oh yeah.
Did want to just also say, like, even as people are sending in their questions, I find it amazing. I read and follow a number of pastors and read their blogs and watch some of their YouTube videos and stuff like that. And I always expect, like, you know, oh, I'm going to get some brilliant pastoral insight of how can I be the best pastor I can possibly be. And yet time and time again, I keep hearing this talk about self-care of you want to be the best that you can be. You got to first and foremost take care of yourself. You got to make sure that you're actually, you know, going to bed on time and, you know, getting up on time, taking care of your body, getting exercise and eating healthy. One author that I follow, he's like, he has a specific bedtime routine and getting up in the morning routine that he's learned as he's looked at himself. This is what works best to make sure that I get a good night's sleep and that I wake up and I'm not angry or, oh my goodness, I slept in too late or whatever. But nope, my alarm goes off so that I can get up, read my Bible, get some exercise, you know, that kind of thing. And so that he's ready for the day, right? He's going into the day energized, encouraged, and ready to go. And so that, yeah, self-care is so important. And of course, the hard part of it is it is so personal. It's so different. What you will do, Wayne, is going to be completely different than what I would do. And so that's where it can be a challenge. And so I do want to let those of you who are watching know, I've talked to Wayne before and he is open for this. If you want to talk to Wayne one-on-one, not necessarily, you know, for counseling, but just to work out with him and talk through coming up with a personal self-care plan, to, you know, have somebody to bounce things off of, well, should I do this? And have someone challenge you and say, well, what helps you, you know, relax, or what helps you to calm down, or what helps you to sleep better? If you'd like that, you can set up an appointment by contacting us either through our website, westsidefellowship.ca, or you can email us at info@westsidefellowship.ca, and we will set up an appointment for you to chat with Wayne. Again, it's not necessarily for counseling. If you want that, that's fine as well. But of course, if you're willing to and wanting to have somebody help you just kind of put together a plan, that will help you take even 1 or 2 steps towards being a healthier version of you, Wayne is more than happy to do that. I'm noticing that, Wayne, you must have been thorough enough that we don't have any questions. Nothing's coming in. So that's fine. Yeah, for those of you who joined in late or want to go back and watch the beginning, I did notice I forgot to push the record button right away at the beginning, but I'll just do a quick intro to it. We didn't miss much, so it's all good. Yeah, I guess with that said, thank you everyone for joining with us tonight. This is our last final session in this module. However, Wayne has said that if you want to know about some other topics, let us know, and he might be willing to do a couple other sessions with us maybe in the new year. And so if there are certain topics that you would like to know more about, please send us an email, info@westsidefellowship.ca, as we would love to put on another module or a series of sessions where we talk about some other mental health topics. Wayne, thank you so much for being here with us, for doing this, for bringing your expertise on this. And we hope that you wrap up your master's degree well, that it goes well, and that you can get through it, and that you can find that balance between the stress of work and family and all that other stuff as well. So I know self-care is very important for you in this season as well. So yeah, I think that's everything. Thank you so much, Wayne. Thank you so much, everyone. We will not see you next Thursday. This is the last one, but we look forward to having Wayne back for another mental health module in the future. All right. Well, have a great evening, and we'll talk to you soon. Then, everybody.
Bye-bye.